Hola! Welcome to our podcast Memory Keepers, an educational space that aims to create awareness among social workers and providers within the healthcare system and the realities that Latinx caregivers of Alzheimer's disease and other related dementia patients experience. This podcast is completely educational and informational without any profit interest. My name is Tolbe Barnaza, and I am your host. I am so pleased to share this space with all of you. My pronouns are she, her, hers, y en español soy ella. I am a Latinx Black woman immigrant, a daughter, sister, aunt, mother, wife, a friend, strong believer in spirituality. I'm an able-bodied, lifelong learner, committed to challenging systemic racism. I'm a social worker, highly motivated by social justice issues, and also I am a caregiver. On that note, I want to acknowledge that I'm currently located in the state of Massachusetts. This is the land that belongs to the Wampanoag and the Mashpee tribes, and other native indigenous populations displaced from their ancestral territory. Today, we are going to be having two guests invited to share with us the knowledge from their perspectives. They are two providers within the healthcare systems. One of them is Mr. Juan Guillén, a senior care coordinator for the state health insurance. Mr. Guillén has been servicing the Latinx population in Massachusetts since 2019. And today, he will share with us the way systems of care are designed and how the population of interest is affected by it. We also have Mr. Adeyemi, a registered nurse that is an immigrant from Nigeria, servicing the patients and their families, providing assessment and referrals to the community. Today, we're also going to be talking about stigma and the ways that impacts the Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients, the systemic responses to these populations, and ways to address it. Stigma as a discriminatory factor that affects the most vulnerable. To give context to this episode, let's start by acknowledging the definition of a stigma. We all have heard that word, and we all have different interpretations of that word. So, what is it? What is a stigma? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, stigma was borrowed from the Latin stigma. Stigma meaning mark, brand, and ultimately comes from the Greek stisan, meaning to tattoo. Stigma in English first referred to scarring left by a hot iron, that is a brand. In modern use, the scar is figurative. Stigma most often refers to a set of negative and often unfair beliefs the society or group of people have about something. For example, people talk about the stigma associated with mental illness or the stigma of poverty. Stigma typically refers to a bodily mark or pains resembling the wound of the sacrifice Jesus, and sometimes accompanying religious ecstasies. The first person said to have experienced this miracles infliction of stigmata is Saint Francis of Assisi, who lives in the 13th century. The dictionary also says that stigma is a strong feeling of disapproval that most people in society have about something, especially when it's unfair. So what is an example of a stigma, and how is it related to the vulnerable population? When someone with a mental illness is called dangerous, crazy, or incompetent, rather than unwell, it is an example of a stigma. It is also a stigma when a person with mental illness is mocked or called weak for seeking help. Stigma among Latinx caregivers of Alzheimer's disease and related dementia patients is a complex and multifaceted issue that can have significant impact on the well-being of both the caregiver and the individual they care for. Understanding the nature of this stigma, its causes, and its effects is crucial in developing effective support systems and interventions for this vulnerable population. Stigma among Latinx adults also influences adherence to antidepressant medications, as the use of such medications is often viewed as a sign of weakness and considered addictive. Stigmatizing views regarding medications also contribute to family dysfunction among family-oriented Latin adults when family members discourage the use of treatment. Stigma has been found to be greater among foreign-born and less acculturated Latin adults. According to Carica 2004, mental illness stigma can block the use of mental health services, especially for the U.S. Latinx population. It was also established that the adults hold greater stigma compared to non-Latin people in the country, despite roughly equal mental health literacy. More and more Americans are living with Alzheimer's and related dementias, affecting the quality of life. Alzheimer's disease and related dementias are a cognitive impairment that often is accompanied by mood and behavioral symptoms. Some of these behavioral symptoms include depression, anxiety, irritability, sleep disturbances, and agitation. Out of all dementing disorders, Alzheimer's has the largest incidence rate. Therefore, the disease's significant characteristics and symptoms are other complex layers to the caring demands, as the caregivers are in charge of facing the questions that others have about it, since the patients gradually lose their ability to understand and process the changes of their behaviors and responses. The stigmas associated with the action of caring for someone is the action of being the memory keeper of someone and being the representative of that person, meaning sharing with a purpose and with limits, and therefore try to navigate different circumstances in which the stigma is going to be determining the communication that the patient and the caregiver are going to be having with others. Stigma among the Latinx population. Several studies agree about defining stigma as a mark of disgrace or shame associated with particular circumstances, quality of person. In the context of the Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients, stigma can manifest in various ways, including social exclusion, discrimination, and negative stereotypes. The stigma might stem from cultural beliefs, lack of awareness about ADRD within the Latinx community, and misconceptions about mental health and aging. Systemic discrimination within the healthcare system. The stigma experienced by Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients have found effects on their mental health and overall well-being. It might lead to increased stress, anxiety, depression, and feelings of isolation. Moreover, the fear of judgment or discrimination from their community might prevent caregivers from seeking support or accessing essential services, exacerbating their challenges. This is Juan Grullón, Senior Care Coordinator, providing services for Latinx caregivers of patients with Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias. Juan, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to participate on the podcast that is intended to enhance and to talk about the experiences that this vulnerable population faces when navigating the systems of care. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us everything that you do and what is the relationship that you have with this vulnerable population.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share my personal experience as a Latin male, and also talk about all the challenges that the population that I serve and that I work with have to face in daily basis. I can tell you that I've been in this program for about 7 years now. This program was created in 2017 and it's intended to connect people to services, especially those individuals who has different diagnoses. Can be diabetes, it can be Alzheimer's, it can be cholesterol, people who has just gone through an accident and they no longer can do what they used to do before. So what we do, we receive the referrals from different sources, the PCP, health insurance, any social worker. A majority of my client is Latino, and we serve the population between 3 and 63. And what we try to do once we get this member referred to the program, we do an assessment, we do an evaluation, we identify different aspects, financial, psychological, biological, health-wise, everything that we can collect. And based on that assessment, we make suggestions. The person can benefit from financial assistance, medical assistance, behavioral health, it all depends. And the most important thing is that we create a service plan, people-centered, based on clients' need.
I would like to ask you, in regards of the people that has diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, particularly the Latino population, can you tell us about the challenges that the caregivers of these patients face when they are navigating the system, the healthcare system? How your program and how the system is helping these families understand the diagnosis and everything that they have to do once they get that diagnosis?
One of the biggest challenges that we have, first of all, there's not a lot of services available for people with Alzheimer's, specifically. And a big problem is like family have to stop working because they need to take care of those individuals. And that becomes financial in top of medical issue. In many cases, they cannot benefit from the services available because the immigration status can affect them. Some cases, they haven't been in the United States longer enough to apply for disability. They need to be at least 5 years permanent resident to be eligible, and also be a citizenship. Unfortunately, when they want to apply for SSI, SSDI, they are not eligible for that. In some other cases, the insurance that they have, it's different than Mass Health Standard. Mass Health Standard covers every services, but if they are not in the United States for longer than 5 years, they're not eligible for Mass Health Standard. In some of the services that the other health insurance, the other claims, Mass Health App, which is Care Plus and Family Assistant, they don't cover every single service that can help that person. Do you know what I'm saying?
So the coverage is limited based on the immigration status. So
exactly.
What you're telling us is that a person that is entering the country but do not have any immigration status is going to be receiving limited services. Whereas
this is not services.
I mean, the support from the system versus the people that is naturalized as a citizens or they are born in the United States, they will be receiving the full benefit of the services.
Exactly.
To help. Oh, okay. So what happened? What people qualify for based on, let's say, somebody that doesn't have any immigration status? How the system support this population that is so vulnerable?
Not necessarily they are in the program, but they have kids in the program. I can give you one example. We have a lot of parents, they immigrated from different countries. They don't have immigration status. However, they have kids with a special need are citizens and they are eligible for services, but this is popping. Those people cannot work because they don't have the work permit. They're not allowed to work in the United States. And then they have these kids with a special need and they cannot pay for housing. Unfortunately, our parents cannot apply for housing because they are not citizens of the United States, and the child needs to be 18 in order to apply for housing. That's one thing. What we do, there's some services that the kids can get through the assistance program, which is a city-based program. They help them to pay for the heat and the electricity. For STEM, they get about $200, $250 a month in food. Now we have some insurance that they have the Flex program that they provide some extra cash for food. They can get a gift card for $100 a month for 3 months, depending on which plans the parents have. But as far as like helping the parents or people with no immigration status, it's really hard to. There's not many services for those people, fortunately.
That is really, really hard to digest, because when you really think about it, there is a large population that is struggling to get their immigration status set, and this is a matter of life and death, basically, right?
It's really hard. And let me tell you something else, which is very interesting too. Like, we have members who came from different countries with children with a special need. I mean, I wouldn't say children, like with kids with a special need over 18. And they cannot get full services because they are not eligible for mass health standard. Therefore, they can get family assistance. And I'm talking about people with like extreme physical disability, people, kids that need, people that need wheelchair, people that need somebody 24/7, and because they don't meet the criteria in terms of immigration status, they cannot get any services, even though they are legal resident.
So with this, and let me ask you something: the services that you provide to the people that is dealing with dementia and all related diseases, are they receiving the services on Spanish? How the system is responding to the cultural, the language needs of this population?
One of the challenges that we face with that specific population, dementia, Simon, it's the language barrier. That's one thing. There is no many services that are designed for the. I wouldn't say there's not many services. I haven't seen any services designed for the Latin community that goes through Alzheimer's and dementia. The information is very limited, and if we do find some information, we have to translate. Some of the people just came from different countries. They don't know the language. I'm not necessarily talking about Latin community. That's the one I know the most, because that's the one I work the most. But we also have people from Haiti, people from Africa. I just don't have those clients because we have people from different backgrounds that we try to accommodate people based on the cultural language, make they work easier. In Spanish, I want to say that it's the second language in the United States. It's fair to say. Can you imagine those people who speak Creole, who speak Punjabi or different language? There's not many information available in those languages for that specific population.
The language is powerful. Absolutely, yes. Language is powerful. And especially when one is going through a difficult situation, you would prefer that you can engage with somebody that speaks your language directly, so you don't have to explain yourself. Or a lot of is missing translation when an interpreter needed to be used. So that is absolutely crucial to identify the services, especially for the population on Spanish so people can really, really feel comfortable and engaged. So let me ask you something. So how you support, through your program, how do you support not just the patients, but the caregivers of those patients with Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias? Is there any services for them?
We suggest the PCA services, personal care attending, so the family can get paid to take care of the loved one. There's also another program called adult foster care that they get paid and they get some services to have those people living with them. They get some discount in electricity. They get fuel assistance through different programs. And that kind of alleviate the financial burden for those people. Yeah, that's the best that we can suggest and do for those people. Yeah, Paul.
So there is not like, like a special program for them in which they can process what are they going through and so forth. It's basically more directed to the daily living. So if they need to go and run an errand, so perhaps a PCA can stay with the patient that on that area. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So Juan, for you on your position as a senior care coordinator, from your perspective as a Latino professional that is servicing your own people, what do you think it could be a significant change on the services so more people, more Latinos can benefit for what you can offer?
I think one of the problems, one of the biggest problems I see, how can you provide help to the person who has the diagnosis and not being able to help the caregiver, the caretaker, because in immigration status, it doesn't allow it. You know what I mean? Like if we can change the whole 5 years thing when somebody comes to the United States, they need to wait 5 years to get any benefit. I will do that because that's such a big challenge for people. Even if they can get the citizenship within the 5 years, at least they can get the health insurance, the health care. You know what I mean? This is something that if I can change, I will do it to give full benefit for those people as soon as they get to the United States. The healthcare services that they need.
So what you're saying is that having that status is definitely one of the biggest issues to qualify for quality and quantity of services.
Right.
And that is so important and it's so pressing nowadays with all the people that is coming into the country at this time and with many different conditions.
Alzheimer's and dementia, there's a lot to discover, especially from the Alzheimer's part. And there's a lot of questions that people have that nobody has an answer. And that makes it harder to educate the family.
It is a mystery. This is it is lots of studies are supporting the statement that nobody knows where it comes from. And how it evolves is so particular to each patient. So it makes this disease really a mystery. And I am very, very grateful for researchers and doctors and all the people on the healthcare system that is working on, providing the best quality of services for the patients. I really am. And with that said, Juan, let me ask you something. What's the hardest thing, the hardest part of your job when you're working with the Latino population?
It's hard sometimes to engage with caretaker and to gain the trust when they don't have, and again, it all comes down to immigration because that's the population that I work with. Sometimes they even reject services because they are afraid that immigration is going to go there. That's one of the hardest part. And for the last few years, it has been improved But before that, it was really hard to engage people in services because of the immigration status.
Juan, what is the best part of what you do? What is that thing that you enjoy the most, that fills your heart with joy? What is it?
I think it's just the fact that I can have the ability to share my knowledge with people, connecting people to services when everything works out, where I can see the family benefiting for services that they qualify for. Just such a rewarding feeling, especially when they don't know that there are a lot of services out there that they can benefit from, and that inform them and connect them to services they qualify, and the life improves significantly. It's just probably one of the best things I can get from my job, from what I do.
That is definitely lending that hand to the people that needs it the most. That is definitely so rewarding. Juan, it has been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge, your understanding, and especially for caring for the Latino population that is in need of a lot of services. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Sylvia.
Some attributes are often shared, including familiarity with the Spanish language, cultural values, and not belonging to the social historical dominant group. In a study conducted by Villatoro and al. In 2014, it was determined that the U.S. Latinx population is heterogeneous across many factors, including ancestral heritage and language proficiencies, that includes the indigenous, Spanish, and English tones, where Latinx population experiences structural within the healthcare, cost, workforce, and supply shortage, and cultural barriers. Similar studies suggest that a large proportion of family members believe that most people in society devaluate people with mental and cognitive illnesses in their families. Due to this, many times caregivers are reluctant to reveal themselves as being the caregivers of people with mental health illness. This is according to the Mental Health Council of Australia. Mental illness stigma can block the use of mental services, especially for the U.S. Latinx population. In a study conducted by Kroger and other scholars in 2017, they argue that studies across the world have evaluated the stigma experienced by family members and caregivers of people with ADRD. The studies from the West suggest that more than half of family members of people with mental and cognitive illnesses report stigma. Now we talk about culture. The cultural values and beliefs prevalent within the Latinx community can significantly influence the stigma associated with ADRD caregiving. For example, there might be cultural norms that discourage open discussions about mental health issues or AD-related conditions. Additionally, traditional gender roles and family dynamics within the Latinx community might impact how caregiving responsibilities are perceived, potentially contributing to stigmatization. In a study conducted by Craig and other scholars in 2009, it was concluded that among some Hispanic caregivers, ADRD is often considered to be the result of having experienced a difficult life. Of the result from such forces such as the mal de ojo, the evil eye, there are also instances where ADRD might carry the stigma of the older person that is losing their mind, and therefore suitable medical treatment is overlooked. Caregivers who face higher levels of stigma are more likely to develop depression and anxiety-related symptoms. Meter et al., on a study conducted in 2019, asserted that the experience of stigma combined with the burden of caregiver role negatively impacts the caregiver's mental health and quality of life. Now we're going to be talking about language. Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients often encounters numerous challenges when addressing stigma. These challenges might include language barriers, limited access to cultural-sensitive resources, and a lack of understanding or recognition of ADRD within their communities. Furthermore, the intersectionality of identities, such as being an immigrant or belonging to a specific ethnic group within the Latinx community, can further complicate the experience of a stigma. Campbell and other scholars of 2009 highlighted that Spanish is a leading power language worldwide among native speakers and speakers in general, including Mandarin and English. In the US, Spanish is the second most spoken language behind English, with more than 37 million speakers ages 5 and older. However, it is still used as a way to discriminate against the monolingual population that has not adhered to the dominant language, English. The language barrier is a significant reason for Latin caregivers' underutilization of the social services available to them. Language limitations and the information offered by organizations that provide services for ADRD population remains problematic. Spanish is the predominant language of many Latino caregivers, and frequently Spanish language public awareness information is not readily available. Dismantling stigma, work in progress. The stigma among caregivers and families appears as relevant as providing treatment to the patient. Caregivers are expected to become the voice of the memory keepers of the patients. They are not in the entire capacity to comprehend the discrimination against them. Affiliation of caregivers with the stigmatized individuals often leads to negative consequences on the caregivers themselves in the form of unhappiness or helplessness. Studies across the world have evaluated stigma experienced by family members or caregivers of people with mental illness and cognitive decline. A study from the West suggests that more than half of the family members with people with ADRD have suffered stigma. Other studies also suggest that a large proportion of family members believe that most of the people in the society evaluate people with mental illness as dementia and their families. And due to this, many at times caregivers are reluctant to reveal themselves as being caregivers of people with mental illnesses. Way to challenge stigma. Constructive methods align with a social justice lens to dismantle the stigma against patients and caregivers of the Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. So first we have, number 1, provide culturally humble education and outreach to Latinx community about ADRD to increase understanding and empathy. The materials ought to be available in their native language, Spanish. Number 2, encourage open conversations about dementia and caregiving in Latinx families and social circles to break down taboos and prioritize the sharing of positive stories of caregivers. Number 3, train healthcare providers in avoiding stereotypes and providing compassionate, patient-centered care to Latinx ADRD patients. Number 4, develop Spanish language support groups and resources to reduce isolation among Latinx caregivers. Number 5, partner with Latinx community organizations and leaders to promote awareness and acceptance of dementia. Number 6, advocate for policies and programs that increase access to affordable, culturally appropriate ADRD care for Latinx families. Number 7, conduct anti-stigma campaigns on Spanish language media outlets featuring Latinx stories and perspectives on dementia. Number 8, increase representation of Latinx caregivers and individuals with dementia in educational material, research, and media. And number 9, celebrate and acknowledge the dedication of Latinx ADRD caregivers to honor their contributions. The National Institute of Health and the Alzheimer's Association highlighted the Latinx values that are associated with the stigma. And those are stigma among Latinx caregivers and the ADRD patients. Stigma surrounding Alzheimer's disease and related dementias is a significant issue that affects not only the patient, but also their caregivers. Among the Latinx caregivers, stigma can manifest in various ways, impacting their experiences and well-being. One of them is the cultural beliefs. Latinx communities often hold cultural beliefs that might contribute to the stigma associated with ADRD. For example, there might be misconceptions about mental health and cognitive decline within these communities, leading to shame and embarrassment for those affected by ADRD. Caregivers might feel pressure to keep the diagnosis hidden due to fear of judgment or discrimination. The collective identity. Latinx caregivers might perceive mental health challenges as a reflection of the entire family's well-being. Stigma arises from the fear of tarnishing the family's reputation or being seen as inadequate caregivers. Language barriers and access to resources. Language barriers can exacerbate stigma among Latinx caregivers, as they might face challenges in accessing information and support services related to ADRD. Limited proficiency in English can lead to feeling of isolation and hinder communication with healthcare providers, further perpetuating the stigma surrounding the disease. Misunderstanding or limited access to information can perpetuate the stigma around mental health conditions. Lack of cultural competence in healthcare system. Healthcare providers' lack of cultural competence can also contribute to stigma among Latinx caregivers. Insensitive or dismissive attitudes toward cultural practices or beliefs can make caregivers reluctant to seek help or discuss the struggles, reinforcing feelings of stigma and isolation. Intersectionality and multiple stigmas. Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients might experience intersectionality facing multiple forms of stigma based on factors such as ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and immigration status. These intersecting stigmas can compound the challenges faced by caregivers, making it difficult for them to access appropriate care and support. And now we have the historical trauma and mistrust. Historical mistreatment, discrimination, and systemic inequalities contribute to mistrust of healthcare system. Latinx caregivers might hesitate to seek help due to fears of bias, cultural insensitivity, or involuntary involvement with authorities. Religious and spiritual beliefs. The Latinx community often relies on religious and spiritual practices for coping. While faith can provide comfort, it might also stigmatize mental health problems. Some caregivers believe that relying solely on prayers and spiritual rituals is sufficient, leading to delays in seeking professional help. The gender roles are another factor of stigma. So, traditional gender roles influence caregiver dynamics. Latinx women often bear the caregiver responsibility, but seeking mental health services can be seen as a cycle witness. Men might face additional stigma for expressing vulnerability. Family lesson. Family lesson is a central value in Latinx culture, emphasizing strong family bonds and collective well-being. While this fosters support, it can also lead to stigma. Caregivers might fear judgment from family members if they seek mental health services for their loved ones. The pressure to maintain family harmony can discourage open discussions about mental health issues. In conclusion, the stigma among Latinx caregivers and the ADRD patients is a complex issue influenced by cultural beliefs, language barriers, lack of cultural competence in healthcare settings, and intersectionality. Addressing this factor is crucial in providing effective support for Latinx caregivers and reducing the stigma associated with ADRD within their communities. Implications. Furthermore, the National Association of Social Workers emphasizes the significance of understanding the diverse cultural backgrounds within the Latinx community and the need for social work education to provide culturally responsive training for students. With Latinos being the largest minority population of the United States and projected to continue growing significantly, there is a pressing demand for social workers to be equipped with the necessary knowledge and skills to effectively support this population. Recommendations to overcome stigma among the Latinx population. Based on the research findings and recommendations of the National Association of Social Workers and related studies, here are some recommendations to overcome stigma among the Latinx population. Providers managing patients with ADRD should not only focus on patients, but also take care of the psychological needs of the caregivers. They should from time to time evaluate the psychological reactions and, when required, master psychological morbidity on the caregivers. So the recommendations are as follows: cultural tailored and anti-stigma interventions. Develop and implement anti-stigma interventions that are culturally tailored to the Latinx population, language preferences, and cultural values. These interventions should address mental health stigma in Spanish media, compare stigma in Spanish versus English media, and adapt evidence-based strategies to align with language and cultural preferences. These interventions should include training providers in implicit bias and cultural humility to enhance communication and understanding of the concrete needs of the population. Another recommendation is the inclusion of Latinx participants on research. Ensure the inclusion of Latinx participants on stigma research, particularly focusing on language preferences and cultural nuances. By incorporating Latinx perspectives and language measures in research studies and interventions, a more comprehensive understanding of the stigma within the community can be achieved. These recommendations should also take into consideration the variations and differences that Spanish speakers have based on their place of origin, therefore ensuring people's understanding based in their scholarly level and cultural background. According to the regulations of the World Health Organization on 2002, the stigma is one that is achieved through the process that individuals or groups come to feel shame without justification, and whereby they are excluded and discriminated. Stigma can affect people in many different circumstances, on different levels, on different positions, and in this case, in particular, the Latinx population and their intersecting characteristics place them in that position of vulnerability to carry stigma along with their daily lives. To recap, addressing stigma among Latinx caregivers of ADRD patients requires a multifaceted approach that considers cultural nuances and community-specific needs. This might involve raising awareness about ADRD within the Latinx community, providing cultural tailored education and support programs. This episode has been an eye-opener for the multiple ways in which stigma is presented and the alternatives to combat it. The participation of Mr. Grullón provided knowledge about how the Latinx populations continue facing discrimination and stigma based on their scholarly levels, access to resources, immigration status, and language capacities. There is certainly more to do to achieve social justice for the Latinx and other marginalized populations. This concludes our episode number 8 of the series The Memory Keepers. I am delightful to spend this time with all of you to enhance mutual knowledge about the multiple phases of discrimination that the ADRD presents within the Latinx population. To all of you supporting this series, thank you. My name is Sylvia Vernaza, and as a person and a professional committed to talk about social justice subjects, the invitation is to spread the word and share this podcast series openly and intentionally with other people that can benefit from it. I am also delighted to be the host for the series, The Memory Keepers. Until the next episode, I wish you all health and peace.
Remember that at the end of the series, you can complete a questionnaire as a requirement to obtain a certificate of completion. To access, please contact sylvia.bernaza2@siemens.edu.